My name is Don Miller. I go by No Carrier, and tonight I'll be doing visuals with Chris and John, which is really exciting. And the visuals that I'm going to be doing are using a new Textmode engine that I wrote, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it tonight. And I posted about this on the 8static Facebook, and I said that even if you don't know anything about programming, you'll still be able to. Hopefully, that's the goal. Code, this will probably interest you. If you don't do any programming, but you're a nerd, then you'll like this. Well, if you're a nerd and you program, you'll probably still like this too, because that's the category I fall into. But anyway, I posted this demo. I'm going to try to pull it up real quick, and I'll show you what I'm talking about when I say text mode. So, I think this is it. Let me see. Yeah, this is the 8static one. So, I made the text really big later because I'm going to show some code samples, but basically this is an example of what I'm talking about when I talk about text mode. So all those graphics on the screen that you see are there are pixels, of course, that make them up, but they're all rendered as text. So there's this plasma layer in the background, there's the 8static text, and then there's that kind of circular black mask that's going in and out. So this is some example code that I'm going to share a link to later. You can play around with this, and I released the engine, which is like a more stripped-down version, open source. So I'm going to talk about how you do this, because again, the image behind this looks like, let's see, I have it in here somewhere where it changed. Oh well, we'll see. But anyway, we're going to get started talking about how to do something like this. And first, I guess I should ask, how many people are familiar with ANSI or ASCII art? All right, good. Show of hands. Anytime there's anybody in a room that raises their hand when you ask that question, you're in a good place. So that's good. There's like 3 or 4 people. If you don't know about that shit, you will in a little bit, hopefully. And so to get started, we're going to talk about input and output, which is really important. So again, I'm trying to say this is for non-programmers, so hopefully this will resonate with some of you. But obviously, every day you probably use a computer. You either use your phone or your laptop or your desktop, and you usually have some type of input. So you hit keys, click on a mouse, touch your screen, that's all input. But today we're mostly going to be talking about output. And when we talk about output, we're talking about stuff that shows up on your screen, stuff you can hear. Because whenever you type anything into a computer, enter any data in, it's got to be outputted in some way for you to see it, or hear it, or feel it. There's got to be some way that you get some type of feedback from the machine. So we're talking about text mode visuals today, which is a form of output. And have you ever seen this before? This is a really old teletypewriter. So way before we had any type of screens like we have here, or the projector up there, we had these things. And you can type commands in on that thing, and it looks a lot like a typewriter. And that little machine on the left could store punched data, and that could be fed in later, and any output from the computer would print right above where that keyboard is. So this is like a main way that you had like a user interface to the computer in the 70s, right? You didn't own a computer, you probably went to a place where there's a timeshare, you spent a couple hours working on this thing, but again, you did have a monitor, you typed, things came out on the paper. So early kind of computer art kind of went that same way with text mode, and this image didn't show up properly, but it looks kind of funny anyway. What I was trying to show is this, right? So like directly following this kind of teletypewriter, you have these things, and these are like computer terminals. And again, on a computer terminal, you don't really connect to a computer that's sitting on that desk. That terminal is connected to a mainframe somewhere, or maybe a microcomputer, but you had at least a screen and you had a keyboard. And again, this looks kind of similar, right? That kind of looks similar to that image right here, the teletypewriter. So again, a long time ago, people were used to this kind of dynamic of typing and getting output in text that was printed, and then naturally what followed was people typing on this type of keyboard and getting text printed on a little monitor. But again, text was the main form of output. And the question, and if you've ever used DOS when you were younger, you probably saw something like this. So early computers had an operating system that was all text-based. And here you have like a limited color palette, and you have some text. I kind of had to squeeze this because of the drum kit, but if we see it bigger, you can kind of see that there's just a number of different characters, slashes, periods, numbers, letters, but it's very basic output. And of course today, we have graphics mode. well, this is a little older graphics, Prince of Persia. It's a great game. And the difference between this image and this image is that here, you could really only put down a character at a time, meaning you didn't have control over individual pixels. You had control over an individual character. So you could put an A down, you can put an M down, like any letter or number, but you couldn't control pixels. So this took up a lot less memory than something like this. And that's because here you had what's kind of called like an all points addressable screen where you can pick any pixel and make it any color. So there's a big difference here because this might only be like 80 by 25 or 80 by 40 characters. So it's not much, maybe like 2,000 different characters on the screen. But the same image right here would be like 224,000 pixels. So if you're comparing 2,000 places in memory versus like 224,000 places in memory, that's a big difference. You don't have to know a lot about computers to know that those numbers are different sizes. Back then, memory was really expensive. So Textmode saved memory. It made things load faster. And it was what people were used to. Because again, they came from this type of shit where you were typing stuff in and text came out on paper. So again, this is what people were used to. But eventually, graphics like this became very favorable. And today, I think a lot of people are reminisce over things like this, or at least people like us in this room, like old text graphics, and might be kind of intrigued by it. And right now, things are mostly RGB, meaning that like all these pixels have RGB value that kind of mix. But again, you can have thousands and thousands of colors, where here you really only have a limited palette. So again, this is kind of quickly how graphics work and how they've kind of come a long way. But let's look at some examples of Textmode, because that's really what we're talking about here today. Again, I really like Textmode, and you know, this demo that I wrote here is all in Textmode. So those are all individual characters, and you can, I think I had a thing in here where you could pause it at one point, but I can't remember the keys for the demo. Anyway, so this is all characters of text. And we'll look at some historical stuff real quick. So I guess, oh yeah, I talked about this earlier. First, the advantages: lower memory consumption, faster screen manipulation, right? It's cheaper. RAM is really expensive. And we're going to look at examples in a minute of ASCII and ANSI art. The big difference between those two is that ASCII is usually monochromatic, uses a limited character set. Can't read that one. Where ANSI is full color, or at least 16 colors, 8 background colors, has more characters. So let's look at some examples. This is examples of cats, because as long as people have been putting things on computers, cats have been involved. This proves it. So this is ASCII art. As you can see, it's art that's just made up of slashes and periods and commas, and it's not that complicated. It's monochromatic, and you saw this a lot if you ever used bulletin board systems back in the day, or you made art in like Notepad in computer class, if you were old and you had computer class in the 80s. This is examples of ASCII, and then it got a lot more complicated. The top is an example of some Commodore Amiga ASCII art versus some DOS stuff on the bottom, and people make text like this. And then you have things like this. It says Blessed Society. This is a Roy, this guy from his Superior Art Creations. Roy has a lot of stuff online. But you can see when you look from far away what it kind of says. And again, it's closed society. If we zoom up, that's all text. This takes a lot of work as an artist, because you have to know the right characters to place in the right spot to kind of get that like little curve that you need at certain times to make things that are just characters kind of look soft and kind of shaped. Yeah, it's kind of like Lego. A lot of things are like Lego to Emily, but that's... I'm sorry. Anyway, so this ASCII, here's another example. This is even crazier, right? This says die something or other. I knew when I looked it up. But you can just see I bought it because it's just so curvy. And again, this is all just simple black and white text, and white text on a black backgrounds. But then you had enter code page 437 and ANSI. And ANSI art is crazy and mind-blowing, and you have a use of all these characters. So ASCII mostly used these characters in here, the slashes, things you saw on a typewriter. But ANSI art extended up to 128 more characters, all these things. And many of these little lines that you see in here were added specifically because they needed to draw some type of user interfaces, like this thing. you see that if you look here, there's all these little squares and lines and dividers. That's all nice and neat, and that's why they added all these characters into this character set. But what they didn't probably realize is that people would take this and end up making art like this. So this is also by Roy, and this says Roy, SAC, for Superior Art Creation. And you can tell, if you take a look at this, compared to his art, where is it? Here, this is cool, but now you have all this shading, and I do want to make this bigger. You can see here, there's all this shading in here, and they use those block characters that you can't see because they're perfectly hidden behind the symbol. There we go. These characters in here, these shaded blocks and these lines became a huge part of ANSI Artist palette. And here you have them here. And this is all right, but if you go into color, ANSI art starts to look really great. This is Acid. If you've been around a while, I mean on the internet a while, probably heard of Acid. They're a huge art pack crew in the 80s and 90s. They had tons of art. And a lot of ANSI art is very reminiscent of graffiti too. And I don't know if it's because they had actual graffiti artists or they were just like dudes in basements that wished they were graffiti artists. I think it's a combination of both, probably mostly dudes in basements. But again, a lot of ANSI art is very reminiscent of graffiti art. And if you saw ANSI art in the 90s, you know, comic rip-offs were huge. It's like way too much ANSI art of Spawn and that character from the 90s. Like every other fucking art pack has like Spawn and X-Force art. And I'm like, But anyway, there's some great stuff. This is an amazing piece by Blocktronics. Who knows who that is? Winnie Cooper, thank you. It's fucking Winnie Cooper. I said fucking just so Emily would feel better. But the thing I love about this is Blocktronics. They do work. This came out last year, and this is really amazing because some of the stuff they're doing here is completely meta. What I mean by that is this is a zoomed out picture. What they actually did was like take those shaded block characters and emulate them with other characters to kind of make it look like the ASCII art has bigger and smaller blocks. But again, this is just kind of zoomed out. So they're doing something that kind of, they kind of reference ANSI art itself by faking these big characters at a different level to kind of show some of the texture that's behind such a large image. There's kind of hexadecimal code or kind of things that seemingly look like computer code mixed in. This is a great image. And then my absolute favorite artists, and I wanted to see these on the big screen, is Cleaner. Have you ever heard of, anybody ever heard of Cleaner? They're a great ANSI art crew. Check them out. They're on Underground, which is like a big demo scene site. Just search Cleaner ANSI. This is a logo that says Elite. If you can read it, it's like an E, an I, a T, and an E. Yes, if you can read it, yeah, you're elite. It's a good point. This is a BBS menu, and that's why there's just a lot of... They do mind-blowing stuff with mostly those block characters. Some more examples is this. This blows my mind. And this, I believe, says Big Yellow Man. This is BYM. And they use all the CMYK palette. So they have a really unique kind of style, the way they do block text. Here's another one, the 6-7, and it's just, I love the way they kind of have the kind of disintegrating pieces of block mode and the textured stuff in the back. They're just masterful in their use of that ANSI palette. This is another one, and they're really good with the curves and the blocks again. And, oh yeah, I thought I put a bunch more in, I don't know how many I put in, but if you compare some of these, right, and thinking all of them came from just this character set. It's really mind-blowing. So I really wanted to, create something to do real-time visual art that kind of incorporates some of this. So to do that, I used processing. Has anybody ever used processing before? Awesome. Awesome. So it's a programming language-ish thing, and what is it and why use it? So it's a programming language based on Java. Java is really popular. And it has a simple IDE, meaning an integrated development environment, all wrapped into one. So you don't have to install a bunch of shit. You download it, it's free, it's open source. Hi, Alex. Good to see you, Alex. They call it a flexible visual sketchbook. So basically, everything you save is a sketch. So it's not like a Java file, they call it a sketch. The idea is that you can quickly prototype and make things. And it's really great for visual artists. So if you like doing art, visual art, but you want to learn to code, definitely look at processing. If you've never coded before, but you want to do some cool shit, look at processing. Dino blew my mind last night. I don't know if he's around. He does visuals and processing now, and they're amazing. And the stuff I'm going to be doing today, the Textmode visuals I'm doing for Joey later, for Animal Style, are going to be all done in processing, all text mode stuff. So again, I like it because it's easy to use. So I wrote this library in processing because I wanted people to use it. I didn't want to write it in C, C#, or some obscure shit that worked on one a Mac or a PC. It's something that was free and a lot of people could use. So that's why I use it, and I think you should check it out if you haven't. Now I'm going to talk about the actual engine. So what I mean is, I wrote this thing, and that's cool that it works, but exactly how do you take code that does, how do you code that's something that looks like this? So I'll talk quickly about how it works, and then I'm going to show off some demos before we wrap things up for open mic. So, the engine, and I call it an engine, and just to talk about kind of, how it actually converts all this stuff. So first of all, I'm going to share out this presentation later once I have some time to annotate it. But these are some links from the README, and I really think that the best thing about the internet is that most people have probably done shit you want to do before. And that sounds lame sometimes if you want to make money on something, but if you're not interested in making money on something, you can always find references, inspirations, and you should always acknowledge those. So I grew up using DOS. I like ANSI art. You should check out The Draw. It's an old DOS program for doing art. You can also check out Pablo Draw if you're using modern computers to do ANSI art. 16 Colors is an amazing ANSI art archive. They actually have their own JavaScript-based text mode editor, so if you're stuck at work, you can still do ANSI art in your browser and save it. So that's amazing. And people have also done what I did before. I'm not the first person to ever create something that changes something to text mode. There's AALib, it's been around for like a decade. It does all black and white ASCII conversion, libcaca, does color stuff, and this guy from Finland made something called TextFX. So I've seen them. There's also the Textmode demo framework that was released, and that was by the guys that run the Textmode demo competition. So every year there's a demo scene competition for people that do demos just using Textmode. And I think their only rule is you got to make Textmode look good. So if you know anything about the demo scene, I heard Brendan was here last month talking about the demo scene. You can look up the Textmode demo competition. But again, even though all this stuff already existed, I made this because I wanted something that I could use in processing, something that was fast, fun, and even though it wasn't as accurate as the others, I wanted something that looked good live. So I didn't want small characters. I wasn't really looking for something that was, spot on, but I was looking for something that would be dynamic, colorful, and kind of fast moving. And I guess we can talk quickly about how it works. And this is where it gets a little technical. I mean, if the rest of that shit wasn't so technical. But basically, there's two windows running. So when you, back and forth, when you look at this, there is what you see, which is the output. But there's also kind of an image loaded for that 8static thing that's not being generated in real time. There's a black circle that is changing in size, that's controlled. And then that background layer, where it looks like the crazy psychedelic color cycle, that's a plasma routine, which is a really old demo scene effect, which just uses the sum of some sine waves to get a color shifting pattern. So there's 3 layers at work here, and they're all displayed, but behind the scenes, there is a buffer, and I draw the graphics to that buffer, and I tried to design this for live visuals. So right now we're running at that first resolution, 24 by 768. This projector does that, or 800 by 600. So even if you have an old computer, or you have a projector that's not that new, you can still do this, running it, and I like it with a black background, because again, if you're doing live viz, one thing you want to keep in mind is black looks good. Like when that screen is dark, and you see just the 8static thing, that kind of contrast is good. A lot of people that do live visuals tend to overload the screen and stuff. Negative space I feel is important. So I tried to base all this text art with a black background where the colors kind of come out. So again, this is kind of geared towards people wanting live. And I used a 16 by 16 font so it looked big on a screen. Because it's no good to have text mode art if the shit just looks like pixels. So, if you get far away from anything, it looks, if you get far enough away from anything, it's going to look like it. But I want people to be able to stand in the back and be like, oh, this moron made art with like hashtags and plus signs. So again, you got to use big text if you want it to look like that. And again, not concerned with accuracy. There's only 11 different characters that you see on that screen. But it's a combination of choosing the right characters with the right colors, which makes it look good. And basically what it does is, goes through your original image and it checks every little area and it just makes a color based on the colors of the pixels in that area, and then it takes the brightness and it assigns a character to it. So the brighter any given region of the screen is, the more the character is larger. So you have periods in the areas that are smaller. I really wish I remember what button it was to pause this. Oh, fuck, there it is. So if you notice the darker regions, if I can bounce around here and hold a mic at the same time. Apparently I can't. All right. So in the darker regions there, you'll notice that you have things like semicolons and lowercase x's or plus signs. But in all the brighter regions, like in the 8static text or the swirls, you see you kind of have that pound or hashtag looking symbol. And that's because the brighter the pixel region underneath, we convert it to something that is, a larger character, so that way it appears brighter on the screen when you have it assigned to a color. And there's what it looks like underneath. And it kind of looks like shitty 90s stuff. I also, maybe next month I'll do something on shitty 90s graphics, but it also looks all right. But then again, this is just to show you what the buffer looks like. And then when you convert it, there you go, you convert it, you can see there's this one-to-one kind of thing where you just analyze the region, throw on a color, and throw on a character based on the brightness. So it's really not that complicated. The code is extremely commented, and we're not going to get into that now. But all you really got to do is come up with the algorithm to do it, and once you've done that, it's pretty simple. And I did that work for you. So it's your job to just take visuals you have, movies or pictures or whatever, and then code something cool. And again, you can have this pure text mode or a block mode. Let me see if I can remember the key block mode. If I hit enough keys, I'll figure it out. There. So yeah, this is more of an ANSI mode. It uses those blocks. So you can see when it fades out, it looks more like text. Has some texture to it still, but then this is ASCII art mode. And always be conscious if you're doing live viz. Black is always your friend. So negative space, the difference between the contrast in black and white or black and colors is always makes things kind of look makes things a little bit more dramatic. So that's why I kind of chose this look for the engine itself. All right, so that's basically how it works. And the demo, I've been showing that the whole time. But if you want to download it, you can go here. It's tinyurl.com/8static May 16. So if you just type that in, it takes you to a GitHub page, and I publish this. And I can help you with it. If you have it, we can talk in between sets tonight. You can always email me or find me on Twitter if you have questions about this. But the code is really commented, and there's a really good README. I do that to fend off all the easy questions. If you have hard stuff, then you just find me. And again, this demo that I have has 3 layers. There's a background layer, the mask layer, and the foreground. I did that to kind of give you a basis. Like, think about your art in that way too. Try a background, or try a layer in between to kind of mask it. Try adding some text or a logo in the foreground. And again, there's that plasma routine, the circle, and the logo. And there's keyboard controls built in that are all documented. You can pause, you can change back to the 90s shitty buffer mode, and you can change to the block text mode. So all that's built in. I do have an engine on my GitHub that is a little bit more stripped down, but if you're releasing open source code, that's cool if people like uber nerds want to mess with just the engine. But this demo should help you, even without a lot of coding experience, get in and try to figure out how it all works. And I think that might be just about it. One thing also I want to talk about is, I guess, my setup tonight. I'll be doing visuals for Animal Style later. I literally just have like a little keypad. This keypad has a bunch of things I wrote on there that remind me what buttons are what. As you can see, I have a problem with that. And then a MIDI controller. So I'm just using a MIDI controller to control some of the fades and the line thicknesses in real time. This little keypad to do some other stuff in real time. And without a whole lot of work, you can probably do a similar thing. So let me see if I can pull this other sketch up real quick. Yeah. So I have this thing here. Plug in. Make sure these things are plugged in. 1 second. So again, this is the code for some of the things that you're going to see later. I'm not going to show you too much, But yeah, so this is some of the more, I like doing stuff that looks psychedelic. Somewhere, my aesthetic is somewhere between typewriters and LSD. So this kind of shows you what we're doing. And then I like to build in things, like I said, in real time. So when you see me tapping this key later, this kind of white flash is really good because you can tap that in time with a BPM, and it kind of resets that fade that you have there and allows you, again, to kind of highlight moments of what the musician is doing on stage. Something like that's not included in that demo, but I'd be happy to tell you how to do that. But these are the type of things you got to think about. You know, you take this code, what's going to be happening? There's going to be some guy up there, he's going to be pumping his fist and probably hitting buttons on the Game Boy, and if you want to make him look good, or her, you need to do things like this, because people hitting buttons on Game Boys, you know, doesn't look good unless there's a bunch of colored text behind it. So again, and then, you know, just things like this. There's the feedback, so you can have the kind of overlapping thing. That's all controllable by MIDI. So I'm showing you there's a lot you can do with this, and I won't show you any of the other things. But again, you know, even to fade out in between songs, to add drama while you're waiting for that like Game Boy beep in the next song to start. You got it. Anyway, so yeah, that's about, yeah, I think that's about it. I want to let you know how you get in touch with me. You have questions. Thank you, by the way, for hanging out. No Carrier on Twitter. Hit me up there. I use Twitter a lot, so I'll be excited if you tweet at me. And again, I will share this out. I'll try to get 8static to retweet a link to this presentation. I'll annotate it. You can download the code on my GitHub. You can hit me up on Twitter if you have questions about it, and hopefully you'll make some cool shit. Because honestly, it's not that complicated, and I'm happy to help you anytime.